Welcome to Now Hear This. I'm your host, Chris Spangle. Now Hear This is a conversation with leaders in Indianapolis that are working to improve the lives of Hoosiers. Our goal is to empower you to join in their work and make a difference while informing you about the unseen aspects of life in Indiana. If you miss an episode, you can listen via podcast at nowhearthisindy.com. I am very glad to bring the show to you today. I'm very thankful that my high school friend, Lindsay Scott, although that's not how I knew her, is joining us today. She reached out, and she is the president and CEO of Kids Voices. Also with us is Katie Kelsey, who is the director of the Children's Law Center of Indiana. On my timeline, there has been a constant flow of questions about parenting time and issues between two parents that may have custody issues. And so we're going to talk a lot about that today. But first, let's talk about what Kids Voices of Indiana does. So, Lindsay, if you wouldn't mind, tell us, what does Kids Voices do?
Yeah, so Kids Voice of Indiana, we are actually celebrating our 35th year in 2020. So we have been around for a long time, and we focus on three main areas. So the first one is what you mentioned, Katie is the director of. So that is our Children's Law Center of Indiana program. And it has a statewide reach and focuses on education and training for anybody. People that are attorneys, people that are social workers that want to be child advocates. So we do a lot of training and education around that. But a big part of that is education and guidance and free legal information for the public. So we have an educational website. We take phone calls to our office. We have free legal clinics when we're able to do them in person. And so that is where we really focus on with the Children's Law Center. And then in addition to that, we also have a guardian ad litem program, and we have volunteers that serve as advocates or guardian ad litems for children in Marion County Family Court. And then we also do supervised visitation at our office. And so we provide that service for non-custodial parents and children to see each other when the judge has decided that there has to be a supervisor present. So we offer that at our office as well.
And your website is kidsvoicein.org. Their phone number is 317-558-2870. They have a great FAQ on custody parenting time during the COVID-19 pandemic, and you can find that PDF in the show notes, but also at their website. And I will say, on behalf of Lindsay Scott and Katie Kelsey, this is not legal advice. This is just a simple conversation guiding people. So please, if you have any specific issues, make sure that you contact an attorney. Having been around friends who have gone through custody battles, Katie, there seems to be one basic guiding principle in the mind of judges and the minds of people like yourself. And can you explain what that particular principle is?
Yeah, so absent really extraordinary circumstances of a parent's own bad behavior, it's really in the best interest of children to have frequent and ongoing contact with both their parents. So courts are going to presume it's in a child's best interest to continue as normal with the normal custody arrangement and normal parenting time arrangements. The pandemic doesn't change that. It may make things more complicated, but it doesn't change that, and it doesn't make a parent unfit. The law presumes that a parent is a fit parent who can take care of their child.
So even if you live in a location with travel restrictions, normal parenting time as outlined by parenting guidelines, which is set by the state, or in a custody agreement, should be followed?
Yes. So the executive order for Indiana specifically provides for travel relating to dealing with custody and parenting time arrangements as an essential piece of travel. So that is a pretty strong indicator that parenting time and custody arrangements should continue as normal. The executive order also provides that care for minor child is part of an essential activity. So parents should continue on as normal with their normal parenting time arrangements.
Lindsay, that doesn't stop some parents from not reading executive orders or from looking this information up. What should a parent do if they show up to pick up their kid, or they're stopped at the door? I'm not picking up the child. You're not allowed to take the kid. You have to continue to go to work. What should a parent do if that situation occurs, in your opinion?
So I think that's a tough question, because I think that is a situation that's very stressful for both parents, but also can be traumatic for the kids. So I think the goal should always be to minimize that trauma and that stress on that child. I think people's first instinct would be to call the police if something like that occurred. And honestly, they have a lot going on during this time. So their ability to be able to assist may be minimized. And oftentimes, they don't really want to get involved in civil issues anyway. I think the best thing to do is really document, what is happening, not by recording. I don't mean that, but I mean keep real good notes of dates and times and things like that. So if there is a certain custody exchange or parenting time that you should have had that you did not get. In addition, the courts are still accepting what we would call an emergency petition regarding something that's going on. So if somebody needs to file something with the court about the inability to see their child or being withheld their child or something to that effect, they could definitely contact their attorney or our office to get information on how to do that. Because of course, everything is only being filed electronically right now. So I would say, the best thing to do is really try to communicate between the parents, be flexible, think about the children's best interests. Obviously, I know things are going to happen, but we want to try to minimize the stress and trauma on everybody involved right now.
Okay, so courts for these sorts of things are open, but what do you say to either Lindsay Scott, President, CEO of Kids Voices of Indiana, or Katie Kelsey, who's the director of the Children's Law Center of Indiana? What do you say to a parent who's concerned about their child's safety or their own safety, and the other parent is someone that is deemed essential? They're, let's say, working in a grocery store or working landscaping or something, and they're moving about in this pandemic, and the other parent is concerned about everyone's welfare. Like, how do you deal with that? How do the courts deal with that, I guess, is the better way to say it.
So this is kind of a benefit of having a legal community like we have in Indiana, because a lot of family law attorneys and judicial officers have had really informal conversations about, like, okay, we're in this crazy time. What should we expect? How should we guide our clients? What do you want to see from us, judges? And we've kind of come to a consensus that, still parenting time and custody should proceed as normal. You should adhere to your orders. If there are really complicating factors, like a child is a medically complex child and they've got special concerns, maybe that might be a situation where you need to communicate with the other parent and figure out, like, hey, can we figure out another way to do this? Should the child come stay with me for a while? Should we figure out a different quarantine period? What kind of safety procedures are we feeling? So the courts are still really wanting to emphasize, that this is a chance for parents to work together and, show their ability to do this. But absent that, they still have the ability to turn to the court and say, we have this true disagreement and emergency. So yeah, you might find situations where one parent is a frontline worker and is constantly getting exposed to this virus, and the other parent legitimately has concerns about exposing the child and their own family unit to it. So that's a concern that if they can't work out together, that may be a good reason to consult an attorney or to turn to the court, especially if there are underlying complicating medical issues. But I will say that unilaterally withholding parenting time or taking a child and not returning them to the custodial parent is not going to be looked on favorably by the courts when this is all over, and they will definitely remember what happened.
Is that generally considered contempt and something that a judge would look very unfavorably on?
Well, I can't, ever predict what a particular judicial officer is going to do. It certainly is a possibility, but these are also really extraordinary times. So a parent's good faith concerns may undercut that. So it's very hard to predict, but using it to your advantage, using a situation like this to your advantage is something that's really not going to go over well.
Yeah. So
and
what
two,
go ahead,
sorry.
Lindsay.
So just after the executive order was issued, talking about some of the things Katie mentioned about, essential travel and things for custody and parenting time, the Indiana Supreme Court also issued an order that basically indicated the same thing. We want to make sure that everyone understands that custody and parenting time and child support, for that matter, should stay the same. And it really indicates at the end that, if you can't pay your child support, if you have legitimate concerns about the safety of your children, then, the courts are the source to get the help for that. And they basically make a statement that, we know that this is unprecedented time, but the best interest in the health of, the children is the main priority. So, I mean, they tried to issue, additional guidance. But I think, as Katie's mentioned several times, the key is that the importance is that everybody wants the child to be able to see both parents as much as possible, given extreme circumstances.
So what about folks that may have out-of-state parents? I mean, one parent lives in Kentucky, another parent lives in Indiana. How is that sort of being determined?
I can't speak to other states' executive orders, but generally I've kind of perused them, and they almost all include some kind of exception for necessary travel for the care of minor children and so on. So at this point, I would say that they're mostly in line with Indiana's, and that, dealing with your children is an essential function of life, and you should continue as ordered, even across state lines. Now, there may come a time where that changes, but gosh, I hope not. But it, at that point, then my information would change.
So what about spring break and summer vacation? Because this is obviously going to go into summer vacation. How are you seeing some things pop up around that at this point, Lindsay?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think there's been legitimate confusion based upon just the changes in schedule. So, school let out early, schools, not going back this year. And so what you have to remember is that when we set spring break and summer parenting time, that was set at the beginning of the year when the schools issued their school calendars. So you should still go to your school's, school calendar and keep the same schedule. So everything outside of spring break and summer that was already planned is still the same. Essentially, that means that spring break, if it's 2 weeks for your school district, just because school was out doesn't mean that spring break is now 5 weeks. So there's e-learning time in there, things like that you have to remember. So spring break, normal parenting time, summer parenting time should all remain the same as you planned at the beginning of the year.
So what if the other parent wants to take the kid to Indiana Beach? What if they're going to just break the order and take the kid on vacation? What do you do then?
So that's obviously a violation of the stay-at-home order. Vacations, trips, they're not part of what we would consider to be an essential activity. So that would be a problem. There is a function on the Department of Health website, but that mostly relates to reporting businesses that are violating stay-at-home orders. There isn't really anything in particular for individuals doing that. So I would say that if you're in a situation with your child's other parent where they are indicating that they're going to take the child to Florida for summer vacation or spring break, I guess that would be the more accurate example at this point, then that would be a situation where if you can't work it out together, you probably need to bring it to the courts.
Okay, so you mentioned child support, and with 20, 30 million people newly unemployed, that's going to become a concern. What does one do if they've lost their job and they're unable to pay child support, or they're may get behind? Like how does that work out in the courts, or how should couples work that out?
So this was included in the Supreme Court order and kind of discussed this, but basically we know that's going to come up. What parents should try to do is pay what they can. So if that means that right now they can only pay $5, they are still making a good faith effort to pay child support. So what they should also do is, it's not the easiest thing to do, but they should notify the court and ask for an emergency modification of child support. Because what happens potentially is that when everything calms down and they're able to get back in court and have their child support recalculated, that amount of child support will backdate to when that petition was filed with the court. So that can help somebody in this situation. I think that, I can't predict what the courts will do, but I do think that they're going to have to be flexible given the economic state right now in our community. And I think that as long as parents really try and are making an effort, I think that they will look favorably upon that. Obviously, they're going to, so many people are filing for unemployment, losing their jobs, out of jobs, furloughed, whatever it is. And I think that that's going to be a new issue that we're going to have to deal with when we get back into court. And so I don't really think anybody can predict how that's going to go right now, but I do think that there's going to be some flexibility around it.
The overwhelming theme we've been getting from judicial officers, from lawmakers, from just about everywhere is let's just do our best. So, if your best is, keeping a receipt of sending money, like keeping check records of sending a check, then that's what we do. Like, that's how we're going to handle it, and we will figure it out on the back end.
Yep.
Seems reasonable. Again, I'm talking to Lindsay Scott, President and CEO of Kids Voices of Indiana, and Katie Kelsey, Director of the Children's Law Center of Indiana. Their website is kidsvoicein.org, and they have a great FAQ that is in the show notes on the podcast or at their website that gives some advice, some guidance on custody and parenting time. Again, none of this is legal advice. Consult an attorney for your specific needs. So my final question is what is or about to start creeping in, which is what if one parent becomes sick or the child becomes sick with COVID-19? How should the courts or parents deal with the fact that, let's say, one of the parents is incapacitated potentially? Who makes the medical decisions at that point? And I mean, it's a sticky issue, but what are the discussions ongoing about that?
So the situation that you're worried about is the situation where there's no available parent left to care for a child or to make medical decisions for a child. If there are two, functioning parents, then if one parent is incapacitated, the other parent still has that ability to make decisions for the child. So what we're trying to encourage people to do is to plan ahead. Nobody wants to think that they're going to get this virus and that the worst will happen, but we've seen lots of cases of perfectly healthy people being hospitalized and completely unavailable to provide care and supervision or make decisions for their children. So we recommend making some kind of family safety plan in the event that a sole parent with no other involved parent, in the land has, or that married parents or parents who are a functioning unit have, so that they can make plans for the event that there's no one there to make decisions for the child. You need to pick a person or several persons, given the widespread nature of this pandemic, who can care for your children and who you trust to supervise them and give them the attention they need and to make medical decisions for them. You can accomplish that informally, or you can accomplish it more formally through a parental power of attorney, or even something like a standby guardianship.
And those materials are on our website. So Katie has put up forms that parents can use and some instructions, and those are coming in Spanish as well. And I think another thing to remember is even if you are in a co-parent relationship, so you're married or you're not married, but you have joint legal custody, you might want to talk to each other about what would happen if both of you got sick, and still have a person. I think it's always good to have an emergency plan.
My husband and I went ahead and figured out several backup caregivers for our kids because just in case we are both unavailable, we need someone to be able to take care of them and to make decisions for them in case they get sick as well.
Yeah, and I've had conversations with my family members about it as well.
So, final question to you both. What is the thing that you see on a daily basis that you wish everybody knew about your work? What would you say to people listening?
For me, I think what is so key for me about our work is how preventative it is. It's really hard to, explain our impact when it's a prevention service. But by everything we do, we are essentially working to prevent children from being abused and neglected. And so whether we're directly providing best interest representation for a child as their advocate, or whether it is providing the, best practice legal information to a parent or a caregiver or a grandparent, they are then able to take that information and use it to protect that child. So really everything we do, at the end of the day is about preventing child abuse and neglect. And that's why, for me, it's so important and so unique as well.
Are we seeing an increase in child neglect and abuse as everyone's staying home? Like, have you seen any statistics or anecdotal evidence that that's occurring?
I've seen anecdotal evidence. I'm hearing from police officers that they're having a lot more domestic violence runs, and there are often children involved. And what is really concerning for us is that we've actually, compared to the same time last year, we've seen a dip in calls to the statewide child abuse and neglect hotline, which at first you're like, oh, that seems great. There's less calls. But the problem is that less people are making calls because there's no access to children. All of the people who would normally report child abuse and neglect, like teachers, counselors, friends, friends, parents, other people like that, have been kind of ripped out of these children's lives, and there are no extra eyes on kids. So we're really worried about what we will see on the back end of this.
That's a really delicate issue, because if you're the other parent and you suspect some form of abuse, neglect of some sort, I mean, how do you deal with that? How do you raise that in a way that doesn't look opportunistic?
It's very hard.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Lindsay?
I was just going to say, yeah, Katie's right. It is very hard. And so I think that, in Indiana, I think everybody forgets that every single citizen of Indiana is a mandated reporter. So, if you truly believe that your child is being abused or neglected, you have the obligation to report that to the hotline. So, I think if you do that, with a good faith and legitimate reason, that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. But it is very tough.
And they should also, parents should keep in mind, too, what I had said earlier, that when we are on the other side of this, courts are probably not going to be overly thrilled with people who used this situation to their advantage and potentially exhausted resources like the Department of Child Services and placed those resources in danger by making claims that were not based in reality.
Right. Okay. So, Katie, what is the one thing that you see daily that, man, I just wish everybody knew this?
Well, I would have to echo a lot of what Lindsay said for our own organization. And in the context of this particular pandemic, I would say that I think that this is really illustrating how important community is to children. Children have had so many aspects of community removed from their lives, and now they are isolated into a very small unit. And I think that this will really highlight how important it is for communities to work together to help protect children from abuse and neglect and other forms of endangerment. And I hope that in the end, some good can come out of that, and more resources and time and attention and funding can be given to organizations like ours and other organizations across the state that help protect children.
What are some things that either of you have seen that can help that with help kids feel more community in this time? I mean, I've seen some beautiful things like kids that have birthdays, their family has parades where they're driving by and honking, or, what are some things that you're seeing that kind of help solve that problem, Katie?
So I have seen in my own neighborhood kids leaving messages for each other with chalk on sidewalk or on the sides of their houses. I have seen families actually rearrange their backyards so that like playgrounds are near each other, but certainly far enough apart to be safe so that kids can kind of play on their playgrounds right across from each other. There's been in my house, a lot of Zoom dates with classmates. So they listen to music and eat the same snacks together, and they do crazy things like make faces and show each other the chewed up food in their mouths, whatever it is that kids do. So using technology, but then also using some more like old school methods of communication by, 2 tin cans and a, and a rope.
What about you, Lindsay?
So one thing I've been seeing a lot of is like scavenger hunts and reforming them in ways that, because not everybody has access to computer or tablet or whatever it is. So within the home scavenger hunt, over the phone scavenger hunt, I've seen like a family tree one where you call, different people in your family to get different information about, who was born this year, who's been to this state or whatever it is. I saw another one that was a gratitude scavenger hunt. So it was finding things, in your life or in your home or in your backyard, that you're grateful for in certain ways. So that's something I saw that I thought was pretty great.
So when we're not in the middle of a pandemic, finally, I want to ask, what does Kids Voices of Indiana, what is your main focus? You're probably focused on a lot of issues right now surrounding this, but what are some of the day-to-day things that you mentioned? A guardian ad litem system and supervised visitation. Those are maybe things that people have heard of. Can you give a brief description of what those two entail?
Absolutely. So the guardian ad litem program is very essential, and to your listeners, I hope too, because we run that program using volunteers. So it is a fantastic way for somebody to get involved with our agency as a volunteer, and you do not need any background information or training. We train you in-house. And what they do is they serve as an advocate for children in family court. So these are kids that are going through divorces, adoptions, guardianships, or any kind of custody or parenting time dispute that's heard in Marion County Court, civil court. And so we do that. We use volunteers who go out, meet with the families, do an investigation, meet the kids, counselor, parents, grandparents, talk to the teachers, and really provide the court with a holistic picture of what this child's life is really like and where would this child be the most safe and stable, at the end of the court case, basically. So we're helping the court system make these decisions for these children that are the best for them. And our staff attorneys then support those volunteers. We provide information in court. We put on our own case, just like a mom or dad or grandparent does. But everything we do is for that child. So that program is really essential to doing that.
Excellent. Well, Katie, anything you wanted to add to that?
Nope, that about sums it up.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Again, their website is kidsvoicein.org. And they have a great FAQ about custody, parenting time in the COVID-19 pandemic. So please check that out. Please share this. Lindsay, Katie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Now Hear This. I'm your host, Chris Spangle. If you missed any portion of our program, you can listen on our website, nowhearthisindy.com. If you'd like to have your organization featured on the show, please contact Gabby at 317-475-7407 or via the contact page on our website. Thanks for listening, and we will be back again next weekend with Now Hear This. Our goal at the Chris Spangle Show is to help you sound smarter while talking with your friends. If you struggle to understand politics, we explain it from an independent, libertarian perspective with all of the irreverence modern politics deserves. We toss out the screaming heads and put people before political parties and give context to the news to make you think. I'm the host. I'm a 15-year veteran of politics and media, and this show is published every Saturday. It's part of the We Are Libertarians network, and be sure to join Wall Plus for bonus podcasts, the complete archives, commercial-free shows, and more. Subscribe now at WeareLibertarians.com.